אשרי האיש אשר לא הלך בעצת רשעים ובדרך חטאים לא עמד ובמושב לצים לא ישב. כי אם בתורת אדוני חפצו, ובתורתו יאהב יום ולילה. והיה כהד שתול על פלגי מים, אשר פריו ייתן ביתו, ועליו לא ייפול. וכל אשר יעשה יצליח. לכן ורשעים, כי אם כמוץ אשר תדפנו רוח. על כן לא יקומו רשעים במשפט, וחטאים בעדת צדיקים. כי יודע אדוני דרך צדיקים, ודרך רשעים תאבד.
לדוד מזמור, לאדוני הארץ ומלואה, תבל ויושבבה, כי הוא עד ימים יסדה, ועל נהרות יכונניה. מי יעלה בהר אדוני, ומי יקום במקום קדשו, נקי כפיים ובר לבב, אשר לא נשא לשווא נפשי, ולא נשבע למרמה. יישא ברכה מאת אדוני, וצדקה מאלוהי אישו. The earth is the Lord's with all of its fullness. The world is the Lord's with all of its inhabitants. Who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in the holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. He will receive a blessing from the Lord and a just reward from the God of deliverance. Kol omer kra v'amar ma'ikra, kol habasar chatzir, v'chol chasto katzitz hasadeh, yavesh chatzir navel tzitz, ki ruach Adonai nashva bo. Achein chatzir ha'am, yavesh chatzir navel tzitz, udavar Eloheinu yakum leolam. A voice says, cry out. But I ask, what shall I cry? All flesh is like grass, and all of its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, and the flower fades, when a wind from God blows upon it. Surely, therefore, people are like grass. The grass withers, and the flower fades, but the word of God endures forever. I do remember meeting your grandfather, for the first time. I said something like, oh, Goldfinger, like the movie. And I realized when I said it, he had probably heard that about 1 million times in his life. But you know, your dad had this kind of intense face. He would kind of squint sometimes through his glasses and scrunch up his face. And with that expression, honestly, for a little while, I didn't know at the beginning when I met him whether he was angry at me or whether he was suffering from indigestion. I didn't know. He had this intensity in his face. And you told me when he would jog, people would stop and wonder what kind of pain or agitation he was in because he had that face. But then he'd start to tell a story, and he'd embark on a theme. And he was a bit of a philosopher, you know that. He had lessons to share, and he had opinions to share, and he had a really good heart. He had a good heart, and he would break into a smile, and he would take a genuine interest in what you were saying about yourself too. He was a GHS. I'm only using acronyms today because you said he loves acronyms. He was a good-hearted soul. He believed in FIE, family, Israel, and exercise. He wanted to exercise, in your words, and become a lean machine. It's clear that whatever he focused on, I'm going to just do one more, okay? Whatever he focused on, he was OHP, 100%. When he did something, it was OHP. There was no halfway with him. He had a strong will. He had a strong conviction. He had determination. One more. Okay, I'm sorry. And he also BIP'd. Boy, did he BIP. He believed in people. He believed in people. First of all, he believed in his friends who were very, very important to him. He took a genuine interest in all of them. And he was curious about people. He was curious in general, in life, but he was also curious about individuals. He would get a sense of someone and Sure, they might end up disappointing him, but his first response, his set point, was to believe in someone. And of course, he was supportive of and believed in all the people around him, all of you. You all feel that your parents grew to respect each other more and more as the years went on and as life presented them with new opportunities as well as new challenges. He admired your mom, he admired Toby for her intellect and for her own charisma. They each had a voice, they each had their own voice. And their voices could easily be heard speaking over each other at times. But they became a great partnership. He admired her depth and her insight and her perspective. He admired her blue eyes. And if anything, he wanted her to stay longer with him on this earth. He was taken with her right away. Truth is, he delivered newspapers to her home on his paper route when he was a boy. He didn't really get to know Toby. He did get to dislike her dog. And later they were introduced, and she was the one. He was supportive of her, and he was, of course, supportive of all of you. And he remembered each of your stories as well, and he believed in them. He realized each one of you were also born with your own voice. Your dad had his opinions, and he would tell you things that he'd want you to use his wisdom to make you succeed, always to make a better self, become a better human being. He had his wisdoms, his sayings. He sought out profound moments. There was often a larger message in the things he would tell you. He would tell you, always make your Jewish identity known. Don't show up somewhere empty-handed. His advice was this great balance of remember who you are, but also remember who you can become. Be proud of where you came from, but also know that there's much more you can achieve in your life. He believed in the underdog, he believed in hard work, and he believed in the world. I started thinking about fishing. I know fishing brought your parents together in its own way. It was one of his great loves. Fishing takes time. You don't go out and fish and expect success right away. You have to have some patience. You have to sit and you talk and you tell stories, but you have to believe in the process, and that's what he did. Not only in fishing, he stayed focused with his process. His own story was of growing up in more modest ways, his early origins, but then working hard and becoming successful. Working hard to make a new lifestyle possible. He traveled a lot, but he put in his time. He was able to retire at 57, and then he took that focus and that determination and that drive, and he helped his kids and his grandkids and devoted himself to his family. He taught all of you how to drive the boat, right? Or he tried to. He and your mom loved to see the world and explore. And even after his retirement, his days preferably began early in the morning on the treadmill and listening to Mamma Mia. You called him a philosopher. You called him Aesop. I think he wanted to make you think. He wanted to make you start to put your mind to work. He wanted you to assess things in depth. He would leave newspaper articles for you, from the Wall Street Journal. He wanted to engage in some repartee with people. And he was a force in the family. Maybe when he said don't show up empty-handed means bring all of yourself to wherever you go. Don't show up without something to share, something to talk about. I just want to add, we don't just tell stories. We are stories. We are our own story. And David was his story. He lived it. He came from a large family, lots of cousins, lots of interaction, close to his mother. He recalls being raised in certain ways by his grandmother, by his bubby. He was a lifeguard at the Jersey Shore. He remembered songs from his childhood. And then he met a girl. And then he lived a life where he wanted to make something of himself but never forget who he was. He lived his story, and you were all in his story. And I know that in sales, you hear no 95% of the time in sales is the way you look at it. But he won a lot more than 5% of the time. And I think it's lovely. He wrote your mom poems every day. He never wrote a book, but he was a writer. He wrote a book with every single day. He had an idea to share every single day. And each of you were impacted by his story, by his drive, by his energy, and by his belief in you. He lived with a good name, and he died with a good name. We're going to hear Matthew. Matthew, come up.
Thank you all for being here to honor my grandfather, especially the week between Christmas and New Year's. I'm in a little disbelief to be up here in front of all of you today, but not because of the usual reasons some would express this about a loved one. Pop led a full life, coming from humble means, a long and successful career due to an exceptionally strong work ethic and a little bit of luck. A joyous retirement where he got to see and experience the world unlike many others. It is hard to fully process standing here before you today because I truly believe Pop would live forever. David Goldfinger was an immensely influential force in the lives of each of his 7 grandchildren, and for the vast majority of our lives, he was our only grandfather. Looking back, it is clear just how seriously he took that responsibility. Pop was born to be a grandfather, and what made him so special was that his inner child changed and adapted perfectly with his grandchildren as we all grew up. When we were little, Pop's playfulness and imagination ran rampant, just like a child's. Whether it was picking up his grandkids from school, snack in hand, or taking us to countless Indians games, Pop was our guy. Visiting Pop and our grandmother, Toby Goldfinger, in the Florida Keys was everything. The Keys house was our playground. The backyard was our aquarium. To his grandchildren, Pop's love language was telling elaborately made-up stories as part of some captivating adventure. The fish that lived under the dock and the birds that flew by were our pets. We took boat rides to a small, very public section of the Everglades we called Poppy's secret place. And when asked why other boats and kids were around, he'd answer without hesitation that it was because he was letting them use it too. He'd sneak somewhere nearby, yet not directly visible, and call to us in his flawless Donald Duck impression. When he made us lunch, he'd sometime add one extra ingredient that clearly didn't belong in the sandwich, and we'd have to guess what Poppy's secret surprise was without looking underneath that top slice of Wonder Bread. It was usually a grape or a few pieces of cereal or a potato chip. From as young as 2 years old, he put a fishing rod in our hands, teaching each of us how to fish, how to make a rod using nothing but a heavy stick and some line, and how to fearlessly grab live shrimp out of the bucket. It is said that the effect you have on others is the most valuable currency there is, and David Goldfinger very clearly embodies that. As we grew from toddlers and preschoolers into grade school kids, Pop's inner child grew with us. Pop taught us that the door to happiness opens outwards. If we had extra fish, we would bring it to a neighbor. In return, we'd often receive baskets of baked goods, star fruit, or oranges from a neighbor's tree. There were few things more important than his local community and helping others, usually without our knowledge. Of course, he was still a character and the adventurer in chief. When fishing with Pop, if you caught a species of fish for the first time, the rule was you had to kiss it before throwing it back. We didn't like it a lot at first. This rule didn't just extend to his grandkids, but also to any friends on the boat who came and visited that day. And even after a full day, when anyone else might be tired from entertaining 7 loud grandchildren, as the boat cruised back towards the house after an afternoon of adventures, each grandchild, in almost a choreographed fashion, would take their assigned place on either side of the boat, life jackets ready, and wait for Pop to yell at the top of his lungs, and I don't want to break your speakers, "Man overboard!" unleashing 7 splashes and laughter before we all swam back in together. As we grew into middle and high school aged, Pop began to give more advice in ways that only he could. He taught us that actions repeatedly speak louder than words, and that you should be intentional in what you do both for yourself or others. Or as he put it, what's the use of talking? He taught us all how to drive the boat. That might be a theme today. He would share Wall Street Journal articles he thought we'd find interesting. He explained that you should spend your money on experiences, not things. Through Pop, we learned to never say no to yourself, to put yourself out there and let others say no to you. Afternoons were often spent tubing, and Pop would show us absolutely zero mercy trying to throw us off the tube in spectacular fashion. You think dad's strength is a thing? It's got nothing on tube strength. When each of us began to truly grow into adults and pursue our passions in college and thereafter, Pop evolved his role to benevolent cheerleader and supporter. Pop placed a heavy emphasis on the value of education and helped all 7 of his grandchildren attend the colleges of our dreams. When one of us had a tough time adjusting to college classes, he checked in regularly. When one of us wanted to become a doctor, he helped make it a reality. And when I wanted to go to law school and become a lawyer, Pop quietly helped me pay for LSAT classes and take the test. David Goldfinger had an enormous love for his grandchildren, our friends, and as we grew into adults, our partners. He had a profound impact on my life, and there will never be another person on earth like him. As a grandchild forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that the world feels so much emptier than it did before, we know the lessons he taught us will bring warmth and guidance for generations. But what brings all of us comfort is knowing that the goodness in Pop's heart stretches far just beyond our family in ways we'll never know. We will miss him daily. Thank you.
Ruth?
Okay, I'll set. Let me just tell you something. Never surprises never end in the Goldfinger family. Wow. My earliest memory in childhood at age 3 in our home in Cleveland Heights is in the bathtub. Nanny came in to say to Ronnie and I that we had a sister. I remember our first home and all of the many things that went on there. Milk in the fish tank, apple flushed down the toilet, hamsters, bunnies, playing in the attic, sledding at Kane Park, swings hitting Karen's eye, a finger smashed in a trunk, pencils in the hand, icicles in the face. None of this was my doing, sort of, kind of. I think I put the milk in the fish tank. That's the only made-up story. And by the age of 5, I tried to act as the oldest sibling because I was the first of 3 in 3 years. I remember going to Boulevard Elementary School only because the movie Goldfinger was a big hit. Kids would ask me if I knew Goldfinger, and I would tell them, yes, he's my uncle. If I reflect back on that, it was probably the beginning of being able to have a quick-witted response, a bit of bullshit, which in the end provides for a fabulous income. If you choose a career as an entrepreneur, a lobbyist, or running or working in a sales organization, short answer is just being a Goldfinger. My dad would take me to work on the weekends and put me on his lap as he pecked away at his manual typewriter. I did whatever he asked, and I always wanted his approval. As I reflect back now, I was Daddy's little girl. I recall our lively dinner table with 3 cats and a dog, begging for morsels of food, and always my dad fed everyone. I also remember if the discussion got heated, Karen and Ronnie defended my mother, and I always my dad. My dad played college football for Rutgers and loved sports, and his only hope was his 3 kids would find a sport. My sport was supposed to be softball. Believing it was in the bloodline, he took me out for my own spring training to the polo fields. No warm-up, I just needed to catch high pop flies. Of course, it was a short career. As my nose first met the ball, blood everywhere. Karen later became his softball player, and I became a sports fan. Still a diehard Ohio State, the Browns, preferring when Art Modell owned the team, and now Packers by marriage. We had season tickets to sports, but for the Browns, we went on the plumber's bus. I think some in this audience had that experience. All games, included hot chocolate with Weiser's Deluxe whiskey. And for warmth, we sat in beechwood bags. For those of you who don't know, they're literally heavy-duty, like Glad bags, painted brown, with the word beechwood on them. Everybody else had blankets, but my father believed we were cutting the wind better by sitting in plastic bags. That's a Goldfinger, Bubba Misa kind of whole thing. So, yeah. While watching at home, if our 4 teams were winning, you were not allowed to move your seat, change what you were eating, nothing, because that's where Goldfinger superstitions around Cleveland sports began for me. And I passed it to my children. Sorry, gang. I love and I fell in love with horses. It was my dad that made me do all the research, find a vet, blacksmith, etc. I found my horse Equite, had him brought to the farm for the first time. Riding him at the farm, he threw me off. My dad taught us early to never give up, and he put me right back on the horse, walked me to the back acres of the farm, and I guess I seemed to have bought a barn rat. As fast as a horse could possibly go back to the barn, he went. Didn't matter. Every weekend, my dad drove me out to the farm, helped me muck stalls, and in the dead of winter, sat in the bathroom at Maple Ridge Farm while I rode my horse. He was my person and my confidant. So, about that great, awesome Maple Ridge Farm. What a gift it was to be in a city where you had no relatives, but you had every Rzepka, Klausner, and Terezik. You all played a role in making me the person I am today. I have so many amazing memories of all summers on the farm. It was our beechwood home that all of our friends came to with or without us there. I am proud to say, you can hear, it's the truth. I am proud to say that because of how you raised us, that stop-by, drop-by concept continued into Deerfield, Illinois. The abundance I feel living in Chicago is from what I learned from the connections growing up in Cleveland. When we were away in college and even after, or camp, all our letters and packages came with an airplane drawing. And as Matthew said, those lunches all started with us when we were younger with a surprise inside. Yes, it was a grape, cereal, raisins, whatever he was up for. I spent my career in sales, as in many in our family. He would say, of course, it's in the bloodline. I shared all my awards, big wins, promotions, industry firsts with my dad. Later in his career, he would say, you're better than I ever was. But whatever I or my siblings did, his biggest win at all was his love for his grandchildren. He loved every single one. When my late husband became ill in the dead of winter at the age of 79, he came to take over from my sister helping me. In David Goldfinger fashion, he stepped up in supporting and calling and loving Matthew, Joey, and Lizzie the Tizzy. Matthew, your grandfather knew his role in your life and often called me to tell me that he spoke to you every single day for many years. He would know how important he was to you, but even more to him. Who else would he turn to discuss a game, to turn something on? Are you watching this? Let's watch this. The rest of us got calls and texts for parades, or the dog show, or maybe the Wizard of Oz. While my dad was in hospice, and after I received many texts, conversations, emails from friends, cousins, neighbors, both in Cleveland, the Keys, and elsewhere, all sharing a story or maybe something he did for them, taught them, loaned them, supported them when life was very hard, and how he truly made a difference in their lives. As one of his best friends said, no one had a bad word to say about your father. Another quote included being in awe of all you do for people you come in contact with those lives you've touched with your generosity and your desire to help others. Dad taught us to put ourselves first, put ourselves out there, say hello to strangers, smile. If you had something around you that was beautiful, take the time to note it, get curious, be a smart investor, Buy on sale, yet enjoy life like a king and travel the world. Read a lot, always vote for candidates who support Israel, and never lose touch with your old friends. Don't hold grudges, and remember how you got to where you are. Dad, I promised you I would carry out everything you taught me, including that all bread ends go to you before me. My children know who now gets the ends. I found an email I wrote 15 years ago on your anniversary, and I had said this many times before, and I'm sure I'll say it again. If I could put on my resume my goals in life, it would be to grow old with a life filled with as much abundance, travel, friendship, and the generous nature my parents had. Thank you.
Ronnie?
Sure. I'd like to thank you all for being here today, as the others have said. I doubt many of us thought we'd be here again so soon, but fate has a way of surprising us with its indifference to our hopes and its commitment to its own strange logic. I was searching for a quote to use as an inspiring springboard to this eulogy. I referenced numerous sources and then came across the perfect quotation from Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said, "I hate quotation. Tell me what you know." This eulogy will serve as a short essay about David Goldfinger, the man, the father, the grandfather, the great-grandfather, the father-in-law, the friend, the mentor, the storyteller, the person. This is what I know. Much of what I do know about my father's past is apocryphal. As we grew up so far from his roots, the stories we were told were not immediately verifiable and therefore had to be taken at face value. That said, this is some of what I believe I know. My father grew up in very common circumstances in and around Newark, New Jersey. I don't know that they were poor, but they were not so removed as to be considered solidly middle class. Despite this, my father seems to have had a rather charming childhood. Again, much of what I know was told to me in story and remains unverified by his contemporary relatives. I did not know many of them, and when I had the chance to meet them, historical verification was not at the top of the list. My cousins, the sons of my father's brother Richard, my Uncle Dick, may have more information as they grew up in New Jersey and had a greater access to family and friends. My father loved to tell and repeat stories of his childhood, many that seemed so pivotal in his life. One that always stood out to me is that he and his brother would walk the beaches in Belmar, New Jersey in the early parts of World War II. He must have been 7 or 8, and find all the flotsam, crates, etc., that washed up on the shore due to the German U-boats torpedoing and sinking U.S. supply ships as they left the New York and Newark harbors. He talked about being able to see the ships burning out at sea at night. I have no idea if that's true. This is, though, when my father was 8 or 10 years old, my grandmother decided that my father wasn't growing fast enough and had a doctor give him a growth hormone injection. One can only imagine with the technologies of the 1940s what was in that concoction, but the results changed the trajectory of his life. To say he grew is to say Paul Bunyan was a bit taller than other men. In his grade school pictures in the 5th or 6th grade, it seemed they asked some giant kid, some high school senior, some big kid, to hold the class sign on picture day. That big kid was my father, and he wasn't in high school. He was a member of that 5th or 6th grade class, but he was 2 or 3 times larger than the other kids. His relative enormity set the course for what would afford him a great many opportunities in his future, mainly football. As the story goes, my father practiced with the high school team when in the 8th grade and played varsity football all through high school. He received a scholarship to Hofstra University, playing for one of the 7 blocks of granite, and then transferred to Rutgers in his sophomore year, where he continued to play football. Rutgers remained a passion for the rest of his life. During his childhood, he was introduced to arguably the greatest passion in his life, aside from my mother and our family. I was told that his Aunt Mattie was an avid fisherman and set my father on the road that would inform and fill so much of his free time and be the basis of so many of the most important friendships in his life. He was fortunate enough to fish in a wide variety of places and with an even wider variety of people, but without question, his two favorite fishing buddies for most of the last 60-plus years, aside from his brother Richard, are Uncle Harry Rzepka and Uncle Peter Rzepka. Uncle Harry for his focus and dedication and enjoyment, and Uncle Peter for the sheer joy and amusement he brought with him. It's hard to see something funnier than a naked 80-year-old man floating in shark-infested waters while Hershey Klausner stood on the bow of the boat, fly rod in hand. When my dad yelled out, "Peter, what are you doing?" Uncle Peter replied, "David, I was bored. I'm having a swim." I would also like to thank the partners in the Dr. T, their boat in Florida, chief among them Bobby Temkin and his lovely wife Susan, for being such great friends and even greater fishing buddies these last few years. The only way to really appreciate the splendor and nature of the Florida Keys is on water. My father reveled in taking newcomers on his boat and showing off the wonders of mangroves and sandbars and the cow pens and his backyard, which was Everglades National Park. He was so proud of his little bit of heaven. Fishing was the gift my father gave me and the thing we shared most. We spent a great deal of time fishing in the Florida Keys together, and once or twice a year in Belmar, New Jersey with my Goldfinger cousins, or on Lake Hopekon, New Jersey with my Berkowitz cousins. As a child, I was consumed with fishing. I still am. And my father's desire to get me fishing allowed me to become a very accomplished fisherman, especially in salt water. It feels wonderful to be very, very good at something. I have my father to thank for that. My sisters and I were lucky to have spent a great deal of time with our parents in the last 3 years. This past April, my family, Stacy, Rachel, Jacob, my daughter-in-law Mandy, and my grandson Oliver, spent the entire month with my father. It was a wonderful diversion for Dad, and he spent time playing with Oliver every day for that month. He talked to him, he told him stories, he made his silly Donald Duck noises, and just hung out. Old dude and young dude. I know we will all cherish that month for the rest of our lives. I better understand the father my father gave to me. David Goldfinger was a very successful sales professional. He took a small manufacturer's rep agency and built it into a nationally respected entity representing some of the largest and most important companies in his industry. U.S. Consolidated was a small company employing a fascinating and unique cast of characters, most of whom had a great impact on my life. Herb Neville, his office manager, was the single most annoying human being I've ever met, but he had a heart of gold and was brilliant beyond words. Jimmy Hall was a quiet man of great personal character, without whom the distribution side of the business would not have flourished. Ethel Adler, his bookkeeper, who came around periodically and taught me the importance of drinking hot water. But most of all, there was Uncle Jimmy Cantaloupe and Fletcher Ellington. Uncle Jimmy was the greatest old world salesman one could ever hope to know. He started his career so long ago that he rode trains to his appointments in Pittsburgh, Columbus, Toledo, and others because there were no reliable roads. Uncle Jimmy served in World War II as one of the monuments men, those soldiers whose job it was to find the treasures looted by the Nazis. He never spoke about this. We never knew how old Uncle Jimmy was until Dad and I got an invitation to come to his 100th birthday party in Virginia, where he had retired. Stories I could tell you about Uncle Jimmy. Fletcher Ellington was a mountain of a man, a Southern gentleman whose parents were sharecroppers and whose grandparents were born into slavery. Fletcher taught me about hard work and kindness and integrity and focus, and he was my friend and he loved me, and he loved giving me a little bit of his beechnut chewing tobacco, then watch me sputter and spit and howl about how horrible it was, and we repeated and laughed and did this ritual every time I saw him for years. He was my friend. I think of him all the time. Few people remember Fletcher, but I do. And my dad did, and we did that together. Say his name so that he will be remembered. I don't remember where I first heard that, but I say their names so that they will live on, if only in my heart. My father knew that it was never my intention to return to Cleveland after college to work in my father's business. In my senior year of college, my father asked me to come to work for him as his plans for the future of his business were severely disrupted. Recognizing all that had been sacrificed for me in my life, I returned to Cleveland to join the business and became a plumbing product sales professional. I worked, I listened, I learned, and I watched one of the best there ever was work almost magically. I had the greatest teacher in the world. In 1990, things happened to change the course of my life forever. First, I reunited with the woman who would soon become my wife and was also afforded an opportunity to start a business with a friend in Chicago. I know it broke his heart when I left, but I also know he was proud of me for having the guts to walk away from the sure thing and have the confidence to risk my future on an unknown. And he had a lesson for me in this as well. As Cortez burned his ships when he arrived in the New World to motivate his men, my father explained that once I left, there would be no coming back, should I fail in my new pursuit. A harsh lesson, but a necessary one, and in the end, another great gift. When I stood here in February and spoke of my mother, I took that opportunity to thank a wide range of people for the participation in our lives and their kindness and love. To all of you, know that I still feel that gratitude, and I will for the rest of my life. But today, and I hope she's watching, I want to thank one person, her amazing team of angels. For the last 3 years, Gina Lynette Knight as we knew her, and her amazing angels took care of my parents. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they were there to help them, feed them, guide them, soothe their aches, and relieve their fears. It is the hardest job to help people exit this world, to die with dignity, but they did so with such grace and kindness. We will be forever grateful. If you ever wonder if angels walk among us, they do. And most of them are from Jamaica. And I say this without reserve, and I will gladly fight anyone who challenges this claim. You will never, ever, not anywhere in this world, find jerk chicken better than Gina's. My praise for her does not do it justice. It is beyond description. My father loved my mother, and that love was among the greatest gifts in my life because he showed me what it is to love a woman, to worship a woman, to live in awe of a woman, to understand that to be without her is to be incomplete and unfulfilled and only a portion or a shadow of what I could and should be. And when she came into my life, I knew because my dad had taught me. And I have loved and worshiped and been in awe of that woman ever since. I will never be able to thank Stacy for all the gifts she gave me, for Jacob and for Rachel, and for her patience and tenderness and kindness and understanding for the last 33 years. And now we have Mandy and the world's cutest man, my grandson Oliver. These things are in my life because of Stacy. Ours was not an easy family to marry into, by no stretch of the imagination. And I am thankful beyond words for her continuing presence in my life. It is difficult, if not impossible, to summarize a life, much less a person, and more so a person like my father. My father was and is a great man. He left a great impact on many of the lives he touched. My sisters and my friends all have stories about some silly or funny or kind thing he did, or the way he was always happy to lend a hand or an ear or lift a spirit or dispel a fear. My father loves his family. He loves his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren. He loves his friends, and he loves the life he built for himself. My sisters and I now join the ranks and family of friends who are now without parents. My father was the last of our Mohicans. My mother, my aunts and uncles, my mother's sister, and my father's brother and their spouses are no longer among us. But they're not gone. They live on in our memories and in our hearts and in the faces of our families. I do believe they will all meet up again in some other place or on some other plane. They find their relatives, their friends, and most happily to me, those that brought them the most perfect joy. Mom's Fritz, our Fritz, Dudley, Wookie, Lily, Thule, Perky, and Bag and Muffin. Life marches on. New chapters are being added. Oliver's chapter, Naomi's chapter, and soon others will join them. My father was loved by many, respected by many, and he will be remembered by many more. But in the end, he was my father, and I will miss him. Thank you.
Karen?
I'll read really fast. Yeah, I will. If I'm being honest, and I am, I feel like how I imagine Taylor Swift feels about her fans, her Swifties that follow her and follow the Eras Tour and catch Taylor's concerts at different locations and different dates around the world. Only this tour is the end-of-the-year version of a similar show many of you caught earlier in February of this year in this very location. I know what you're thinking. If this is really like the Eras Tour, where's the merch? Well, people, have you met us? We're the Goldfingers. We have merch. Come to the Shiva. You might get some chopped liver, but you'll get merch. If you don't know what merch is, it's merchandise. It's the cool word for merchandise. We've got gifts for all of you. It didn't matter what was inside. I'm not even sure I liked what he made. Contrary to popular belief, what was on the inside didn't matter as much as what was on the outside. My dad, David Goldfinger, was a poet. The kind of poet that didn't know it. The kind of poet that didn't know it but chose to show it. Not for the world to see, rather just for me and my friends, who loved to see the art he penned. Every day, 5 days a week, on my brown lunch bag, my dad's poetry game was unique. Each one started with Karen G., and regardless of the middle, the poems always ended with, "A friend to me," or "I love thee." That's who he was, a mediocre poet at best, who loved with loyalty and fierce energy that was stronger than the rest. I'll stop rhyming now. My dad, David Goldfinger. I was at my father's side much of the time in his final weeks, a witness to both the gifts and miseries of being near death. To me, that time is a swirling Ultraman-like vision of spongy lollipops in water and then rolling the wet and heavy heads over his parched lips so he might receive a few scant drops. I have news. It is freaking hard to die. The body will not be easily stilled. Its pumps and circuits and muscles and pulleys resist shutdown. How a body as incapacitated as my father's managed to fight and fight back with such punch astounded me. It's a lesson I will not soon forget. In my estimation, my dad, David Goldfinger, did not want to go. His heart was failing. The circulation in his lower extremities stopped circulating. He had plenty of medication, and yet he seemed to rail against the unfairness of it all. He would not countenance a final departure. We, the tentative and loving team of family members and caretakers, put my dad, David Goldfinger's inability to let go down to his having unfinished business to attend to. The lunch bag poet appeared as art, an old man in full repose on his deathbed, his body wasted. Yet he was clean and well kept, as a file of well-wishers came to say the respectful goodbyes.
We all, the clunky crew of amateur magicians, pulled rabbits out of hats as we responded to his every request, his every need. Late at night, in the dark, my dad, David Goldfinger, turned his head toward me and told me in his weary, diminished, barely audible voice that I am a lovely person. I crumbled as tears sprang from my eyes, snot running from my nose. And you know what? I didn't actually hear him correctly. I realized what he said. He said, "You are a loving person." In his way, my dad, David Goldfinger, expressed his gratitude. Perhaps that was part of his unfinished business, and he finished it. The celebrated poet Mary Oliver once wrote, "To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, let it go." As I let go of my dad, David Goldfinger, it is my hope that he has seen, felt, experienced extraordinary joy and an abundance of awe. A man who loved so completely and lived so big that even in the twilight, he did not go gently into the night. I admire his fortitude and his strength. And I know that my dad, David Goldfinger's greatest feat of strength was the moment he finally let go. If there's something I've learned from losing my parents, Toby and David Goldfinger, in less than a year, it's how to be a griever. And in that, how to be with grief. And because this is my turn to speak, I'm going to share some things with you that perhaps you know, and I'm sorry if you do. Here it is, a blessing of sorts for those who are grieving and those who love them, and for me and my family. May you give yourself permission to talk about them whenever you want. May you say their name out loud with freedom, even if it brings you to your knees. May you be surrounded by those who say their name, who tell you stories or observations about who they were to them. May those who surround you say their name, knowing that saying their name may bring you to your knees, and their connection to them an acknowledgement of your love. It's far more important than any discomfort they may experience by bringing you to your knees. For us, those who love David and Toby Goldfinger, the core family of mourners, please say their names. Please say Toby and David Goldfinger. For Ruth, Ronnie, my husband David, Jacob, Matthew, Sam, Joey, Gabriel, Rachel, and Elizabeth. And for the nearly 1,200 men, women, and children, the innocent victims of Hamas who lost their lives on October 7th. And for me, please say their names. Dad, David Goldfinger, I marvel at your will. I celebrate your strength. I am forever grateful for your courage and your conviction. And I honor your love by doing the thing, the very stuff of my earliest memories. I'll pack up my troubles in my old kit bag. This is my dad's favorite song. What's so worrying? We're having so... Oh. That. Okay. That's it. Thank you. Hey, thanks, Rabbi. I'm done.
Let's rise, everybody.
מלא רחמים, שוכן במרמים, המצאנו הנכונות, תחת כנפי השכינה, במחלות קדושים דהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת דוד גולדפינגר, שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהי מנוחתו. הנבא על הרחמים, אז תראו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, ותצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני ונחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen.
May we remember all of the worthy deeds that he performed in the land of the living. May he rest in peace. And we all say amen.
Amen.
Let's be seated, everybody. We want to offer our condolences to Ruth, to Ronnie, to Karen, Stacy, and David, to grandchildren, Matthew, Joey, Elizabeth, Jacob, Rachel, Sam, and Gabe, and 2 great-grandchildren, Oliver and Naomi. We're going to move now to the burial spot where we'll complete the service. We're going to arrange the processional and move to that spot right now. We're also going to announce that the family will be receiving friends following the burial today and continuing till 5 p.m. And then again this evening, 7 to 9 p.m. That's at the residence 4 Haverhill Court in Beechwood, after the service until 5, again tonight 7 to 9, tomorrow 2 to 5 and 7 to 9, and Friday 2 to 4 p.m. Let's remain in our seats for another moment. The pallbearers, however, should now come forward.
Exit through the rear of the chapel and go across through the lobby. If you are not going, obviously your cars are still on this side, you may exit through the front of the chapel. If you're driving with us to the cemetery, remember to manually turn on your headlights. I appreciate it. The family appreciates your being here for them today. Thank you.